They say weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of your life, a celebration of love, devotion, and the promise of forever. But what if, on that very night, the foundation of that promise crumbled in the most unforgivable way? What if, beneath the champagne toasts and first dances, a betrayal so deep, so twisted, was already in motion? For one woman, the night she said, "I do," was also the night her world shattered. What started as a fairy tale ended in a crime so shocking, so brutal, that it left an entire community in disbelief. A sister's ultimate betrayal, a husband's darkest secret, and a murder that would shake even the most seasoned detectives to their core. This is the story of Samantha Carter, her husband Daniel, and the sister who would destroy everything. Samantha Carter stood in front of the grand mirror in her bridal suite, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the delicate lace veil draped over her shoulders. The reflection staring back at her was everything she had ever imagined. Her dark brown curls pinned up in an elegant twist, her makeup flawless, her white gown flowing like something out of a fairy tale. This was it, the moment she had waited for since she was a little girl. Outside, the sun cast a golden glow over the rolling hills of the Virginia countryside. The venue, a sprawling estate with towering oak trees and ivy-covered archways, was breathtaking. Every detail had been planned to perfection. The soft flicker of candlelight lining the aisle, the fragrant bouquets of white roses, the string quartet playing softly in the background. This was meant to be the happiest day of her life. And at the end of the aisle stood Daniel. Tall, handsome, he was everything she had ever wanted. They had met 3 years earlier, a whirlwind romance that swept her off her feet. He was charming, thoughtful, the kind of man who remembered the little things, how she liked her coffee, the way she tapped her fingers when she was nervous, her favorite song to dance to when no one was watching. Their love felt effortless, natural, like it was always meant to be. As Samantha took slow, deliberate steps toward him, she felt her heart swell with happiness. The moment she reached him, Daniel took her hands in his, giving her fingers a reassuring squeeze. The world around them faded as the officiant began speaking. "Do you, Samantha Carter, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Do you, Daniel Harper, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." The words were simple, but they held the weight of forever. When Daniel lifted her veil and kissed her, the cheers of family and friends surrounded them. Everything was perfect. At least, that's what she thought. Among the guests, Emily Carter watched with an unreadable expression. Emily, Samantha's younger sister, had always been a little different. Growing up, the two had been close but wildly opposite. Samantha was the responsible one, the golden child who followed all the rules. Emily, on the other hand, was reckless, impulsive, and always seemed to find trouble wherever she went. She had a natural magnetism that drew people in, especially men. And yet, despite their differences, Samantha loved her fiercely. They had been each other's protectors, their bond unshaken even when Emily made choices that frustrated everyone around her. Samantha had been the one to bail Emily out of bad situations time and time again. A drunken mistake at 18, a failed relationship at 22, a lost job at 24. Samantha was always there, picking up the pieces. Even when Emily had shown up unannounced at her apartment 6 months earlier, broke and needing a place to stay, Samantha had opened her doors without hesitation. So, when it came time to choose a maid of honor, there was no doubt in Samantha's mind. It had to be Emily. Some of her friends had warned her. "Are you sure? You know how she is, Sam. She has a way of making everything about herself." But Samantha dismissed their concerns. Emily had promised to behave, and she wanted her sister by her side. At the reception, the champagne flowed freely. Samantha and Daniel shared their first dance as husband and wife, swaying to the music as the rest of the world faded away. Laughter filled the air, guests clinking glasses and making toasts. But not everyone was celebrating. At the far end of the ballroom, Emily sat alone, swirling the wine in her glass, her expression distant. A few guests noticed, an eyebrow raised, a whisper shared, but no one dared to question it. As the night wore on, Daniel seemed distracted. At first, Samantha brushed it off as exhaustion. Weddings were overwhelming after all. But there was something about the way his eyes flickered across the room, the way he hesitated before answering simple questions. Something was off. And Emily, she avoided Samantha's gaze entirely. But Samantha was too blissful, too wrapped up in the joy of the moment to pay much attention. If only she had, because if she had looked closer, if she had really seen what was right in front of her, she might have caught the secret lurking beneath the surface. A secret that would destroy everything. As the last guest trickled out of the reception hall, Samantha Carter felt like she was floating on air. Her cheeks ached from smiling. Her feet throbbed from hours of dancing. But none of it mattered. She was finally married. The day had been perfect, or at least as perfect as any wedding could be. Daniel's arm was wrapped around her waist as they walked through the grand double doors of their honeymoon suite. The echoes of distant laughter and clinking glasses still lingering in the hallways of the estate. A bottle of champagne sat waiting for them on the nightstand, two delicate crystal flutes beside it. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, of intimacy, of promises sealed with whispered words and stolen kisses. But Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Daniel had been distant. It was subtle, the kind of thing only someone who truly knew him would notice. A moment of hesitation when she reached for his hand. The way his smile faltered at times, as if his mind was elsewhere. He had blamed it on the exhaustion of the day, and Samantha had accepted that explanation. After all, she was tired too. Still, a strange unease settled in her stomach as she turned to him, forcing a teasing smile. "We did it," she whispered. Daniel exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, we did." The response was wrong. Offbeat. He should have been elated, should have pulled her into his arms, but instead, his eyes darted to the clock on the wall. "I think I need some air," he said suddenly, his voice tight. Samantha frowned. "Now?" "Just for a second. I need to clear my head." A dozen possibilities ran through her mind, none of them pleasant. Maybe he was feeling overwhelmed. Maybe the reality of marriage had hit him all at once. Or maybe, just maybe, he was already regretting it. But Samantha wasn't the type to create problems where there weren't any. So she nodded. "Okay, just don't be too long." She watched as he grabbed his jacket, his movement stiff, forced. Then, without another word, he slipped out the door, leaving Samantha standing alone in the middle of their honeymoon suite, still dressed in her wedding gown. She waited for him. 5 minutes. 10. The clock ticked on, and with each passing second, the unease inside her deepened. She tried to distract herself, peeling the pins from her hair, slipping out of her gown and into the silk robe that had been carefully packed for this very night. She poured herself a glass of champagne, took a sip, then another. But Daniel didn't return. By the time 20 minutes had passed, worry had fully settled into her bones. She picked up her phone, hesitating for only a moment before sending him a text. "Are you okay? Where did you go?" No response. Her mind raced. Maybe he had gone to talk to one of his groomsmen, or maybe he had needed a quiet moment to himself. But if that were the case, why hadn't he just said so? Another 10 minutes passed. Then, a knock at the door. Relief flooded through her as she rushed to open it. Finally, but it wasn't Daniel standing on the other side. It was Emily. She looked shaken. Her usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced with something raw, something bordering on panic. Her makeup was smudged, her dress slightly wrinkled, as if she had thrown it back on in a hurry. "Emily?" Samantha's brows knitted together. "What are you doing here? Have you seen Daniel?" Emily's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes darted away, and for the first time, Samantha felt something cold slither down her spine. "Emily," she repeated, her voice firmer now. "What's going on?" But before Emily could answer, Footsteps echoed down the hall. Daniel. He stopped when he saw them. His new wife standing in the doorway, her sister frozen beside her. And in that moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt. It was gone just as quickly as it appeared, but Samantha had seen it, felt it, and deep down, even though she didn't have the full picture yet, she knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. For weeks after the wedding, Samantha Carter lived in what she thought was newlywed bliss. She and Daniel settled into their routine, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee, weeknight dinners filled with laughter, whispered dreams of the future. To everyone around them, they were the perfect couple. But beneath the surface, something felt off. It wasn't obvious at first, just little things. The way Daniel seemed preoccupied when she spoke, the way his phone was suddenly always face down on the table. He had never been the type to keep secrets, but now, there were moments when she could feel the distance creeping in. And then there was Emily. Samantha hadn't seen much of her since the wedding night, which was unusual. They had always been close, inseparable even, but Emily had grown distant, her texts growing shorter, her voice tight when they did speak. She claimed she was just busy, but something in her tone suggested otherwise. Then, one evening, Emily called. "Sam, I need to talk to you." Her voice was different, urgent, almost breathless. Samantha could hear the sound of her pacing and could almost feel the tension through the phone. "What's wrong?" A pause, and then a shaky exhale. "I think I might be pregnant." The words hit Samantha like a punch to the gut, but she quickly masked her surprise. Emily had always been impulsive, reckless even, but this was huge. "Oh my God, are you okay?" "Whose?" She stopped herself before finishing the question, but Emily must have known what she was about to ask. I don't want to talk about that yet," Emily interrupted. I don't know what to do." Something was wrong. Samantha could hear it in her voice, could sense it in the way she hesitated. But she didn't push. "Not yet. Whatever you need, I'm here," she promised. It wasn't until later, as she lay in bed beside a sleeping Daniel, that the nagging feeling in her gut turned into something sharper, something colder, because Emily hadn't told her who the father was, and the way she avoided answering, it didn't sit right. The next few weeks were a blur. Samantha tried to push the thought out of her mind, but the signs were everywhere. The way Daniel flinched when she mentioned Emily's pregnancy, the tension that filled the room whenever her sister's name came up, the long, hushed phone calls that ended the moment Samantha walked in. It all came to a head one evening when Daniel left his phone unattended on the kitchen counter. It wasn't something she normally did. Samantha wasn't the kind of wife who snooped, but this time she couldn't stop herself. She picked up his phone, and there they were, the messages. "Daniel, are you sure you're keeping it?" "Emily, what choice do I have? This isn't just my secret, Daniel. It's ours. Daniel, I can't lose Samantha. We have to be careful." Samantha's vision blurred. Her hands shook. The words on the screen swam before her, but the message was clear. Her husband, her sister, the baby was his. Everything around her seemed to slow. The sounds of the world faded until all that remained was the pounding of her own heartbeat. The nausea hit her like a wave, cold and violent, and for a moment she thought she might collapse. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But it was. Her wedding night. The night she had been waiting for her whole life. The night she had been in their honeymoon suite, waiting for her husband. He had been with Emily instead. A betrayal deeper than she had ever imagined. Samantha didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply put the phone down, exhaled shakily, and made a decision. She was going to confront them. And this confrontation, it would end in blood. The night Samantha Carter decided to confront them, a storm raged outside. Wind howled through the trees, rain lashed against the windows, and thunder rumbled in the distance. a fitting backdrop to the storm brewing inside her. Her hands trembled as she gripped the kitchen counter, staring at Daniel's phone, the damning messages still open on the screen. Every word felt like a knife to her chest, cutting deeper and deeper until the pain was almost unbearable. She had loved him. She had trusted him. And he had betrayed her in the most unforgivable way. Emily, her own sister. The betrayal was layered, more than just infidelity. It was a violation of everything she held sacred. And now, Emily was pregnant with his child, a child that should have been theirs. Samantha's breath was ragged as she wiped away tears. She needed answers. She needed to hear from them. She needed justice. Daniel wasn't home when she stormed into their bedroom, but his keys were gone, and she knew exactly where he was. Emily's apartment. Samantha barely remembered the drive over. The roads were slick with rain, the streetlights casting eerie reflections against the pavement. Her grip on the steering wheel was tight, her mind spinning with possibilities. Would they deny it? Would they try to lie? To cover up the truth even after she had seen the messages? When she pulled into the parking lot of Emily's apartment complex, she spotted Daniel's car instantly. A fresh wave of rage surged through her. He was here. Samantha didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She used the spare key Emily had once given her and shoved the door open, the force of it slamming against the wall. Daniel and Emily were on the couch, frozen in place. A half-empty bottle of wine sat on the coffee table between them. Emily's eyes widened in horror. Daniel stood abruptly. But before he could say a word, Samantha threw the phone at him. "Explain this." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's face paled. Emily looked away. Neither of them spoke, and that silence confirmed everything. "Say something." Samantha's voice cracked, raw with fury. "Sam." Daniel took a step toward her, hands raised. "Don't," she snapped. "Don't you dare act like you didn't do this. How long? How long have you been sleeping with her?" Emily's lips quivered. She looked like she might cry. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "Oh, really?" Samantha let out a bitter laugh. "Tell me, Emily, how was it supposed to happen? Was I supposed to find out after you had his baby? After you played aunt to your own child while I was clueless?" Emily's sobs started then, her hands clutching her stomach as if protecting the very thing that had shattered Samantha's life. Daniel, however, had the audacity to try to rationalize it. "Sam, please listen to me. It was a mistake. We never meant to hurt you. A mistake." "A mistake?" Rage roared through her, hot and uncontrollable. Her hands clenched into fists, nails biting into her palms. Her heart pounded, her vision blurred. And then, something inside her snapped. The next moments passed in a haze. 1 second, she was standing in the living room, glaring at them. The next, she was in the kitchen. The cool handle of a knife fit so naturally in her grip. It wasn't premeditated. It wasn't even fully conscious. It was instinctual. The betrayal, the lies, the deceit. It all came to a head in a single, irreversible moment. Emily screamed first. Daniel lunged toward Samantha, but she was quicker. The blade sliced through the air before sinking into flesh. Blood sprayed across the white walls. Emily's shrieks filled the apartment, a chilling sound that barely registered in Samantha's ears. Daniel gasped, staggering back, his hands flying to his abdomen where the knife was buried deep. He looked at her, his wife, with something between shock and horror, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to speak but couldn't. Samantha yanked the knife free. Daniel collapsed. Emily rushed forward, but Samantha turned on her, the blade still dripping red. "Don't," Samantha warned, her voice low, dangerous. Emily froze. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at Daniel's unmoving body. The man they had both loved. The man they had both betrayed. A minute passed. Then another. The only sound was Emily's broken sobs and the rain pounding outside. Samantha looked down at her hands at the blood staining her skin. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Daniel was dead, and there was no undoing it. Samantha Carter didn't remember dropping the knife. One moment, it was in her hand, slick with blood, and the next, it clattered to the floor, the metallic ring cutting through the heavy silence. The weight of what she had done crashed over her like a tidal wave. Daniel was dead. His body lay motionless on Emily's living room floor, a growing pool of crimson seeping into the carpet beneath him. His eyes, once so full of life, of charm, of lies, were empty now, staring at nothing. Emily was still sobbing, her body curled against the wall like a wounded animal. She was gasping, shaking, her hands pressed to her mouth as if she could shove the reality of the situation back in. "Oh, my God," she whispered. "Oh, my God. Sam, what did you do?" Samantha's own breath came in ragged gasps, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. She had acted on instinct, on raw, unfiltered rage. She hadn't planned this, but now there was no taking it back. She had killed her husband. Emily scrambled to her feet, pressing herself against the far wall as if she thought Samantha might turn on her next. Her tear-streaked face was a mixture of fear and shock. "We have to call the police," she choked out. Those words jolted Samantha back to reality. The police. What would she even say? That she found out her husband had been sleeping with her sister? That she had discovered Emily was pregnant with his child? That she had snapped? No, that wouldn't matter. None of it would. The facts were simple. She had stabbed him. She had killed him. And now she had two choices: turn herself in or run. Her eyes darted to the knife on the floor, the blood on her hands. The evidence was everywhere. But then something unexpected happened. Emily, still trembling, took a deep breath and wiped at her face. Her eyes flickered from Samantha to Daniel's body, and then something shifted. "No one has to know," she whispered. Samantha blinked. "What?" Emily swallowed hard, her expression unreadable now. The fear was still there, but beneath it was that calculation. "We cleaned this up," Emily said, her voice steadier than it had any right to be. "We make it look like he left, like he disappeared." Samantha stared at her sister, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You want to cover this up?" Emily's jaw tightened. "I want to survive." Samantha hesitated. She had expected Emily to hate her, to scream, to turn her in. But instead, she was protecting her? Or maybe she was protecting herself. If the truth came out, Emily's own secrets would be dragged into the light. The affair, the pregnancy, the shame. They stared at each other in heavy silence, and Samantha realized something chilling. Emily wasn't doing this out of love. She was doing this out of self-preservation. And just like that, the choice was made. Together, the two sisters began cleaning up the mess. Their bond forever changed, their fates intertwined in a crime that could never be undone. The case of Samantha Carter shocked the nation when the truth finally came to light. What was once seen as a tragic case of a missing husband unraveled into a twisted tale of betrayal, rage, and murder. For months, Samantha and Emily had kept up the lie. They spun a story that Daniel had left, that his disappearance was a mystery. But lies can only hold for so long. Eventually, inconsistencies surfaced. Neighbors recalled hearing a struggle that night. A forensic team uncovered blood that had been hastily cleaned from Emily's apartment. And then, the final piece. An anonymous tip that led police to where Daniel's body had been buried in a shallow grave just outside of town. The betrayal had ended in blood. But the cover-up? That's what sealed their fate. Samantha was arrested, and during her trial, the full truth was laid bare. The affair, the pregnancy, the moment of rage that had ended Daniel's life. Emily, despite her efforts to hide the crime, couldn't escape judgment either. Both sisters were sentenced, one for murder, the other for aiding in the cover-up. What started as a picture-perfect wedding ended in a courtroom. Two sisters sitting on opposite sides, their once unbreakable bond shattered beyond repair. It was a crime fueled by love, by hate, by a betrayal so deep it cost a man his life. And in the end, no one truly won.